My husband cheated with my assistant, who secretly spied on my business to steal my clients and destroy everything I built, but I uncovered their deceitful plan, outsmarted them with evidence, and fought back to save my company and reclaim my life with strength. You think you know someone, but then you find their secrets tucked away in a place you'd never think to look. That's what I told my best friend, Michael, the night I found out my husband, Brian, was cheating on me with my personal assistant, Cora. I'm Helen, 32 years old, and I thought I had my life figured out, until it all unraveled in ways I never could have imagined. My story's messy, raw, and full of choices I never thought I'd have to make. But it's also about how I fought back, pieced myself together, and came out stronger. It started 6 months ago, when I noticed Brian acting strange. We'd been married for 7 years, and while no marriage is perfect, I thought we were solid. Brian, 35, is a charming financial consultant with a knack for making people trust him. He's the kind of guy who can walk into a room and own it, confident, witty, always ready with a smile. But that charm hid a side of him I didn't see until it was too late. Cora, my assistant, came into my life 2 years ago. At 26, she was organized, sharp, and seemed genuinely eager to help. I run a small event planning business, and with my schedule packed, I needed someone I could rely on. Cora was perfect, or so I thought. She'd handle my emails, schedule meetings, even pick up my dry cleaning when I was swamped. She had this quiet confidence, always polite but never overly chatty. I trusted her completely. That was my first mistake. The first clue something was off came when Brian started staying late at work more often. He'd always been ambitious, but these late nights felt different. He'd come home distracted, his phone buzzing constantly. When I asked, he'd brush it off, client meetings, big projects, the usual. I wanted to believe him, so I did. But then I noticed Cora acting strange too. She'd linger at my desk, asking personal questions about Brian and me, how we met, what we did on weekends. At the time, I thought she was just being friendly. Looking back, I see the red flags I ignored. One evening, I was working late in my home office, a cozy space filled with vision boards and stacks of vendor contracts. Brian was supposedly at a networking event, and I'd sent Cora home early. My laptop was acting up, so I grabbed my work tablet, the one Cora used to manage my calendar. That's when I saw it, a notification from a messaging app one didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. My heart stopped. There were messages between Cora and Brian, hundreds of them. Flirty texts, suggestive photos, plans to meet at a hotel the next week. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I scrolled through their messages, my hands shaking. They'd been seeing each other for months, sneaking around behind my back. But what hit me harder was a cryptic exchange about the files and keeping her in the dark. It didn't take long to piece it together. Cora wasn't just my assistant. She was digging into my business, my finances, my life. She was a spy, feeding information to someone, maybe a competitor, maybe worse. And Brian was in on it. The betrayal cut deep, but the bigger problem was what they were after. My business was thriving, handling high-profile events for wealthy clients. I'd recently landed a contract with a major tech company, and there were sensitive details, budgets, client lists, proprietary plans, that could ruin me if they got out. I didn't know how much Cora had already shared or what Brian's role was, but I knew I couldn't confront them without a plan. If I tipped them off, they could cover their tracks or worse, sabotage me further. About a month before I found the messages, I'd started noticing small things that didn't add up in my business. Contracts I'd sent to clients would mysteriously get delayed, or vendors would call saying they'd received conflicting instructions. At first, I chalked it up to my own exhaustion. Between my mother's hospital visits and keeping up with Brian's late nights, I was barely sleeping. But one incident stuck with me. A high-profile client, a CEO named Linda, called me in a panic because her event's catering order had been cancelled without my knowledge. I fixed it, but Linda's trust in me took a hit. That was the first time I suspected someone was tampering with my work, though I never imagined it could be Cora. The thought that my own assistant was sabotaging me felt too wild to entertain, but it planted a seed of doubt that grew over time. The stress of it all started to wear on me in ways I didn't expect. I'd always prided myself on being composed, the kind of person who could handle a crisis with a smile. But one night, after another vague excuse from Brian about a late meeting, I found myself crying in the shower, the hot water mixing with tears. I remembered our early days, how Brian and I would stay up late dreaming about our future, laughing over cheap wine in our tiny apartment. He'd promised to always have my back. How had we gone from that to this? I started second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd pushed him away by working too hard or focusing too much on my mother. Those doubts gnawed at me, making it harder to trust my instincts when I finally uncovered the truth. Then there was the issue with my part-time bookkeeper, Emily, a 28-year-old single mom I'd hired to help with invoices. Emily was sweet but scatterbrained, and around the same time I noticed the business glitches. She started making mistakes, misfiled receipts, double-booked payments. I didn't want to fire her, she needed the job, and I liked her. But her errors added another layer of chaos. One day, I caught her texting during a meeting, and when I asked her to focus, she got defensive, saying she was just trying to keep up. Later, I found out she'd been texting Cora, who'd been feeding her false instructions on my behalf. It was another betrayal, smaller but still painful, and it made me question who else in my life wasn't what they seemed. Dealing with Emily's mistakes forced me to confront how much I'd been carrying alone. I'd always seen asking for help as a weakness, a holdover from my childhood when my dad left and my mom raised me single-handedly. But one afternoon, I broke down and called my old college roommate, Rachel, who lived across town. Rachel, 33, is a therapist with a knack for cutting through nonsense. Over takeout at her place, I vented about the business, Brian, and my mom. "Helen, you're not superhuman," she said, pushing a plate of dumplings toward me. "You need to lean on people, real people, not snakes like Cora." Her words stuck with me, and when I later turned to Michael and Sarah for help, I realized Rachel was right. Building a team to fight back wasn't weakness, it was survival. Those weeks of suspicion and self-doubt also brought back memories of a time when Brian and I faced a different kind of challenge. 3 years into our marriage, we'd hit a rough patch after I lost a major client. The financial strain was brutal, and Brian took it hard, blaming himself for not supporting me enough. We went to counseling, and for a while, it worked. We learned to communicate better, to rebuild trust. I thought we'd come out stronger. Now, knowing he'd thrown that away for Cora and a quick payout, I felt foolish for believing in him. But those memories also reminded me of my own resilience. If I could get through that, I could get through this. I started keeping a journal, scribbling down my thoughts late at night. It wasn't much, but it helped me stay grounded, especially when Betty's accusations or my mother's health scares threatened to pull me under. That's when the other problems started piling up. My mother, who lives an hour away, had been struggling with her health. She'd been in and out of the hospital for heart issues, and I was her main support. Between managing her appointments and keeping my business afloat, I was stretched thin. Then there was Brian's sister, Betty, who'd always been a thorn in my side. Betty, 30, is the opposite of Brian, blunt, nosy, and fiercely loyal to her brother. She never warmed to me, always hinting I wasn't good enough for him. When she caught wind of our marriage troubles, thanks to Brian's careless venting, she started meddling, showing up at our house unannounced, demanding to know why I was pushing Brian away. I was drowning in stress, but I couldn't let it show. I had to stay sharp to protect myself, my business, and my future. The first thing I did was call Michael, my oldest friend. He's a tech guy, 40, with a no-nonsense attitude and a knack for solving problems. Over coffee at a diner, I spilled everything. "Helen, you need proof," he said, leaning forward. "If Cora's a spy and Brian's helping her, you can't just accuse them. You need hard evidence, something they can't wiggle out of. Michael helped me set up a plan. I started by securing my business. I changed all my passwords, moved sensitive files to a new encrypted server, and hired a cybersecurity consultant to audit my systems. Then I turned to my personal life. I couldn't stay in the same house as Brian, pretending everything was fine, but I also couldn't leave without raising suspicion. So I played the part, smiling, making dinner, acting like the clueless wife, while quietly gathering evidence. I installed a tracking app on the tablet Cora used, which gave me access to her messages and emails. That's how I confirmed she was feeding information to a rival event planner, George, who'd been trying to undercut me for years. George, 42, was slick and ruthless, the kind of guy who'd smile to your face while plotting to steal your clients. Cora's emails to him included details about my tech company contract, down to the exact budget and vendor contacts. Brian's role was less clear, but he'd been meeting with George too, likely for a cut of the profits. The emotional toll was brutal. Every night, I'd lie next to Brian, my mind racing. How could he do this? We'd built a life together, weekend hikes, late-night talks, plans for kids someday. Was it all a lie? And Cora, her betrayal stung just as much. I'd treated her like a friend, confided in her, even invited her to my birthday dinner. The anger kept me up, but so did the fear. If they ruined my business, I'd lose everything I'd worked for. Then came another blow, my mother's condition worsened. She needed surgery, and I was the one coordinating her care. Betty, of course, used this as ammunition, accusing me of neglecting Brian because I was too busy playing nurse. I wanted to scream, to tell her the truth, but I held my tongue. I couldn't risk Brian finding out I was onto him. Instead, I leaned on my lawyer, Sarah, a sharp 45-year-old who specialized in business and divorce cases. Sarah was a godsend, calm, strategic, and fiercely protective. She advised me to document everything, the messages, the emails, Brian's late nights. If you're going to confront them, Helen, you need leverage, she said. And if you're going to divorce him, you need to protect your assets. Sarah helped me freeze our joint accounts and transfer my business funds to a new account Brian couldn't touch. She also suggested hiring a private investigator, Edward, to dig deeper into Cora and George's dealings. Edward, 50, was a former cop with a gruff demeanor but a keen eye for details. Within a week, he had photos of Brian and Cora at a hotel, plus records of payments from George to an account linked to Cora. It was the proof I needed, but seeing those photos, Brian's arm around Cora, laughing like he used to laugh with me, felt like a knife to the chest. With the evidence in hand, I planned my move. I invited Brian, Cora, and George to a business dinner at a private room in a local restaurant. I told Brian it was to celebrate the tech company contract, and I asked Cora to help organize it, knowing she'd think she was still in control. George agreed to come, probably hoping to gloat. Betty, predictably, invited herself, claiming she wanted to support Brian. The dinner was tense from the start. Brian was his usual charming self, but I could see the unease in his eyes. Cora kept checking her phone, and George was all smiles, oblivious to the trap. Betty just glared at me, sipping her wine. After the appetizers, I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. I know what you've been doing, I said, looking at Brian and Cora. The affair, the spying, the deal with George. I have proof, messages, photos, bank records. I slid a folder onto the table, copies of the evidence Edward had gathered. The room went silent. Brian's face drained of color, Cora froze, and George's smile vanished. Betty started to protest, but I cut her off. This isn't about you, Betty. It's about them betraying me and trying to ruin my business. I laid it all out, how Cora had been feeding George my contracts, how Brian had helped for a payout, how they'd planned to undercut me. I told them I'd already secured my business, changed my accounts, and sent the evidence to the tech company, who'd blacklisted George. You're done, I said to him. To Cora, I added, "You're fired. And I'm pressing charges for theft and fraud." Brian tried to talk his way out, stammering apologies, claiming it was a mistake. But I was done listening. "We're over, Brian. Sarah's already drafting the divorce papers." I turned to George. "If you come near my business again, I'll make sure everyone in the industry knows what you did." Betty was furious, yelling that I was ruining Brian's life, but I ignored her. I walked out, my head high, even as my legs shook. The restaurant's dim lights and clinking glasses faded behind me as I stepped into the cool night air. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The weeks that followed weren't easy. The divorce was messy, Brian fought for everything, but Sarah was relentless. She got me a favorable settlement, including the house and most of our savings. Cora faced charges for stealing trade secrets, and George's reputation took a hit when word spread. My business not only survived but grew, thanks to the loyalty of my clients and the new security measures I put in place. My mother's surgery went well, and she's recovering at home. I visit her every weekend, and we're closer than ever. Betty still blames me for Brian's downfall, but I've learned to let her anger roll off me. Michael's been my rock, always ready with a bad joke or a late-night pizza run when I need it. Looking back, I'm proud of how I handled it. I didn't just survive, I fought back, protected what was mine, and came out stronger. My life's better now than it was before the betrayal. I've got my business, my family, and a new sense of who I am. But sometimes, I wonder if I made the right calls. Should I have confronted Brian sooner? Should I have tried to save the marriage? What would you do if you were me? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did I take the best path, or is there something else I should have done?
Appreciate you watching. Give it a like, hit subscribe, and catch more drama next time.